Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, greetings and salutations. Today I have got the wonderful Matt Archibold, known as BSV Archie. How are you doing, Matt? We did do an interview before and I lost the interview because my PC got corrupted when I was rendering out the file. So Matt has kindly agreed to come back and talk to me again. Archie is doing the philosophy course with Craig. He is a student of Bitcoin and is also an intern for Slictionary. So thank you very much, Archie, for coming and joining me again. And do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, etc.?
Sure. So like I said, Matt Archibald. I'm active duty military for the last 16 years, but I'm gonna get out, and I think I've been really into Bitcoin for about 5 years, but I haven't actually done anything with it. I just kind of study, try to learn. I think it's fascinating. So that's why I decided I'm gonna make a change, and I reached out to Jack over at Slictionary, Jack Pitts, and asked him if I come intern for him for a couple months, and he said okay.
Okay, so first I've just put up this bsvarchie.com and we'll talk about that later because you've already mentioned Jack at Slictionary. So how did you and Jack at Slictionary kind of get involved with each other? Did you reach out to him? Did he reach out to you? How did that happen?
No, I reached out to him. He wasn't looking for anyone. Slictionary is probably one of my favorite projects. I just enjoy words, and then just seeing. I watch all the content that CoinGeek puts out, or that you put out, or everything around BSV. So I was aware of him, and then I've also used it. And whenever I had like an issue with Slictionary or something, I would DM him on Twitch, and he would get it fixed right away. And so I had kind of a few interactions with him, but then when
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity to do an internship, yeah, I reached out. I think I just DM'd him on Twitch, and then had a conversation with him.
What's your Twitch handle? So people
Um,
know.
it's Archie. Let me look at the. I don't remember the number. It should be a lower number, but
Oh, are you an OG?
it's 14,564. I
14,500.
remember. Yeah, I remember actually. I watched it was the when they first started. I think Josh Petty's CoinGeek London, the 2020 early
Mm-hmm.
2020 CoinGeek London one. I watched it, not live. I think about 2 days after, and then I went and tried to create an account, and then I don't know, I didn't do something, but and then it took me a couple months before I went back on there. But
I must admit, it was like when I joined Twitter at the very beginning, I couldn't get my hand around it. And then I left it for a couple of years. And then it was like, it just clicked. It was a eureka moment. And I think that was the same with Twitch. I looked at it to begin with, and I was like, this is a bit like what's going on. And then it was a couple of months before it's like, oh, yeah, okay, now I get it. I get it. I really do. So, yeah. So
and
you
I
did.
got into that, I guess, because it was Bitcoin. I don't really have any other social media. I'm kind of an introvert.
Well, you did say that you're on active duty, okay,
Hmm.
with the US Marines. So I've known people in the past who work for the police and for the Marines and in the Army, RAF, etc. And their stance was that actually you're not supposed to be on social media. I always think that that's probably a good idea. So first of all, let's go straight into dictionary and then we'll go on to your website because your website is, I think it's really interesting because you've written some fantastic articles and it makes sense from what you said about the fact that you want to be a wordsmith and an intern on Slictionary because of the way that you write your articles and your essays. Talk to us about Slictionary and tell us what Slictionary is for those people that don't know.
I guess that's another way that I started interacting with Jack. Every time I would write one of my essays, then I would pick 10 words or so that would go with it, and I would put word bounties up on it. Can you see the
Okay.
the Slictionary?
So yeah, so we've got down at the bottom, we've got slictionary.com, and then this is the website, which to me does look like you are being sucked into a black hole of words and letters. So go on. You've talked about word bounties. You've talked about internship. Come on, explain all of this.
So what Slictionary is for those of you who haven't seen it before. It's a self-learning dictionary, and it's built on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin being BSV. The way it works is you have to pay a penny to seek a word or look it up, and I guess we'll just try one. So say we do Diddy,
Now,
because I put a
you,
bounty in there last
yeah.
time, and I think people wrote.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay, so we've got Diddy. Okay, so let's have a look. So
so
lots of people took part in this then.
it looks like there were, so you can scroll through and then it goes back through. So it looks like two people.
Because there's a pink bust, okay, and
Mhm.
can you see it? Okay, so I knew this about Ireland, but I didn't know it was in Scotland as well. So there is a phrase, and it's quite a rude phrase: "Show us your diddies," and that means show us your breasts, and that's why there is a pink bust where you can see breasts. But I didn't realize it was a Scottish phrase as well. Also, actually, in Hindi, diddy means little sister because I know somebody, an actor and model, and he told me that a couple of weeks ago that Diddy means little sister in Hindi.
Okay, so right there, you probably know have way more knowledge about the word Diddy for good reasons. If you don't
I,
like these definitions and you want to write a better one, you just I can do better, and then you write your own definition. So you can upload your own photo, which is one of a good feature too, because you look at most dictionaries, even the other online dictionaries, don't have a lot of photos with them, and
mm-hmm.
people can learn and understand so much more from a photo sometimes.
Yeah, and also there is the opportunity to be able to record voice. Quite a lot of people as well are auditory learners instead of visual learners. So that's also a really good way of being able to do it. So you can put the image in, you can put the written word in, and then you can also say the word as well. So that's quite cool.
So it's pretty much all the other stuff in the dictionary. But last time when I put you in there, I guess I
Mm.
should have, in, as a bounty, you can. Well, in the future, they have a roadmap. What you see now is really just getting started of the plan, and the overall company is structured linguistics. Jack has a pretty long term vision, and then even like if you put Diddy in there, to even have you and write a whole bio about you, so it'd almost be even a competitor of not only dictionaries but like encyclopedias like Wikipedia and that, for example. Let me go back to Diddy and then just show people as well the concept. So once you pay your penny, so whoever wrote these definitions owns them, and you can see who wrote them. The, it'll have their hand cash handle, and if say, hey, I like this definition, then you select the light bulb, and then they own the definition, so they get the portion of that 1 cent that you spent to look it up. And then it's self-learning because the algorithm's going to know as people vote. So it's self-learning, and it learns from people as they look it up, as they look up words and vote for what definitions they like.
Go on, how would you set a word bounty?
Okay, so there's several ways. So I was gonna you can look at the bounties and you can write definitions. There's you can get from here also, but if you look up a word that's not in there, it'll also prompt you to do it. But if we do either one of these buttons, it'll take us to where these are the word bounties that are currently on there. So if there's any wordsmiths who want to try to win these bounties, so $25 of BSV currency is already completed, but inflation, if you want to, so if we want to look at what's in there for inflation right now, we pay a penny.
And that says $25. Is it the first person that writes the definition, or is it when somebody actually presses that light bulb, like you said? Is that when they get the word bounty reward?
No, so it'll set, let me come back here. So inflation. So somebody will, if you want to become a baron, you can come in here, you set a bounty, you put whatever word, you set your bounty. I'm gonna pick one. Oh, in the Slack channel, there was a conversation going about AI, and then Dr. Wright was in there. He said, his opinion on AI, and he said he used the word I wasn't really familiar with, was cogent. So I'm going to set that word. Let me go back. And we'll look and see if it's even in there. Saying if AI can write cogent sentences, we'll see if that word's in here. And it's not. So I can do a bounty. I can set a bounty for 1 penny right here. But if I don't set it for $2 or more, then I'm not going to own that word. So let me just go back to the regular bounty. That word's not in Slictionary yet. So I'm going to become a baron. I want to own that word. And if I want to own it, I need to set it has to be at least $2. But
Okay.
I'm gonna do $4 here, and it's gonna charge me $1 to create the bounty. And so we'll see if it comes up here. The reason it charges you $1, all right, so it's on the list, and it's awaiting the first definition. Because when people write definitions and you own it, it becomes an NFT. And right now Slictionary uses STAS tokens, so it's just a
Cool.
UTXO, and then the different definitions that people are going to write. So this was set. The sponsor for this was Real Coingeek. They sponsored inflation. So once the competition is complete, then they're going to own all of these definitions that people write, and they're going to be put into an NFT on a STAS token. So if they decide they don't like that definition, then they could just turn it back into Bitcoin for whatever it's on. But now that they own these definitions, if whoever comes in for however long Slictionary is around and decides they like someone's definition, uh, then they're going to get like, hey, a portion of this penny. So you can see how in the future, by owning the NFT, you can actually earn money. I don't know if that does that make sense.
Yeah, I was reading the definition of inflation. A monkey has one banana. Banana is valuable. A monkey grows a tree full of bananas. One banana is not rare anymore, not as valuable, or no value at all. Great definition. So these, you're saying these are STAS tokens. So basically, these are all written on chain anyway. So they will be around as long as what the BSV blockchain is around for, which could be forever.
Correct. I'm sure we'll get into that too. So let me come back to the bounties. But the competition begins. So put this in here. Once somebody writes the first definition, then it'll be 7 days to compete. And whoever goes in there, whenever people go in there and then vote, whoever has the most votes is going to win. Will win the bounty. We're getting, so yeah, I'm interested in this one too, because I think inflation is like, what does it mean? So I think this is an interesting one, but
Very short and sweet and simple. Increase in money supply.
and and yeah, but really too, when you go to and they need to fill up. You can see how much it has to get filled when you look at how many definitions there are for words. I
I
mean,
mean, this is quite. I mean, because you've got $25 at the top there, and if you go to completed bounties, I remember Kristen Argan Hansen because you showed me this last time, and he did one. Was it 500? Was that $500? You could make this a full-time job for some. If you really
right,
wanted to.
right. And the dictionaries will be better. I think I have. It's interesting. Like, how does a dictionary get made or get written? There's an interesting story about the Oxford English Dictionary, and they made a movie about it called The Professor and the Madman. And really, I think I have, if I can share this too. I think so. I have Oxford Languages, and they kind of tell the history. If you go through some of them, history of the Oxford English Dictionary and everything. It was, the mid 19th century. They decided they wanted to make their dictionary, and it took them almost 75. It took them 75 years to write the first edition, and they were trying to do it, internally, and it was there's just so many words, and they're trying to go to the sources and get the right definitions and make sure everything's correct, and they ended up having to, outsource it to the public.
So the film, The Professor and the Madman, was out it was 2019, and it stars Mel Gibson and Sean Penn, funnily enough, both of them playing English men.
It's a
good film, though.
Yeah, good. It is a good film. And then, I mean, it just tells you, it's interesting. And when Jack tells his story too, he didn't even realize, he hadn't seen the film and didn't know that's how they had to outsource it to the public, which is exactly what he's doing again now. He didn't realize that that's how they had to do it in the first place. It's really the same thing he's doing.
Well, let's see how many words were in the English language. There's 171,146 words currently in the English language, and new words can be put into the English dictionary, Oxford English Dictionary, in a new etymology.
Right, and so right now you can see how many words are in Slictionary right now, and then how many definitions for each of those words, so how much there is to fill up. But when you say the new words too, it's interesting because, so I've already started my next essay, and it's based on, they do this word of the year, and even, I think we talked about it last time too, but if we do the word of the year for 2022, or they even talk about it, and they have, Oxford Languages has an entire team of people who just research language and how it's used and how it changes over time. And that's another argument for Slictionary, and the way it's tracked, and the way the public will update words and update definitions and put it on the blockchain and vote for the meanings is, it's just going to do it in real time on a public database. And that's going to be the best way to track how language change and evolves, and how new words come in and out. But dictionary, they have a word of the year.
This is my favorite picture of goblin mode. So it's basically a goblin just surrounded by absolute carnage, because literally they're just zoned out on their phones. That's goblin mode.
Yeah, you need to, man, I'm trying to go to the 2022 one as I'm sharing my screen, but the runner-up for 2022 is actually metaverse. I'm gonna try. So my next essay is gonna be around that word, because what is the metaverse? Why has it become so popular? In 2022, that it was, Oxford Languages runner-up word of the year.
Okay.
They even say to be the word of the year, the word doesn't have to be coined that year. So
does it just have to be like the most popular word that's spoken or something? Come on, explain it.
They don't have exact metrics, but I'm going to put that in the essay too, because they'll have a graph. I have it. Let me see if I have it up here in this one. Oh, I guess I do have it up here. They have how the word of the year is chosen, and 20 for Oxford Languages. This is the first year that they actually let the public vote on the word of the year. Okay. Before, it was their internal team would choose it. For 2022, their team chose words and then let the public vote on them. So here's the second place one. All right, so I'll try talking normally, and so
this is interesting as well, because metaverse is made up of two different words. Meta is the word, I think it's I can't remember exactly, but one language it means dead, and verse obviously can be a poetic verse or something as well. So the two words together, so will you define metaverse and then meta and verse?
Let me that's an interesting question right there too, because what does the word really mean? And then I want to also get to that in the essay, and how we decide on the definition of words, because does the dictionary or the people who write them do it? And then I'm going to argue in there that words are chosen similarly to the way blocks are accepted in Bitcoin. The white paper says it's by convention, so it follows the protocol, the rules, and if it meets all the rules, then the miners will accept it by convention. And similarly to the meaning of words, it's what the public accepts, and that's also why Slictionary is good, because it really is on the public blockchain, Bitcoin, what everyone accepts as the definition of the word, and then that's what they'll vote for, and that's what will be put in there. But when you say, hey, what does meta or verse mean? When we, as just anyone by convention, decide what the meaning of a word should be, we should still follow sets of protocols, just like miners do. Like, what is the etymology of the word? How is it used in the past? What was the original use of the word? And then that's where we go to right here in metaverse too. The first recorded use of metaverse in Oxford English Dictionary dates from 1992 in the science fiction novel Snow Crash. So I'm reading it. It's an extremely interesting book. I would recommend it for anybody. Any word nerds will really enjoy it. It ties into everything he writes in the book, keeps tying back into a lot of the essays that I've already written. So it's fascinating to me. But so far in the book, it's really just a computer generated. The metaverse in the book is a computer generated virtual reality.
Okay, so like Tron then, but 92. When was Tron?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh, that was 1982. So in the film Tron, a computer hacker is abducted into the digital world and forced to participate in games that are like gladiator games. So that for me was kind of the first metaverse thing. I mean, I don't know. It's a very classic film. It's a lot of buzz was around that film at the time. It's amazing graphics and everything for 1982. It's brilliant. But yeah, it was just a guy who's sat in his basement on his computer. He gets sucked into the computer, and then he has to try and get out of the computer. And he's being chased around, and he's got these bikes that are amazing. So it's well worth watching. Well worth watching. But so that's interesting that somebody said 1992 science, but then maybe it's the way that he defines it, and maybe that is more of a metaverse than what Tron is. Tron is sucked inside of the computer, but for me that would be the first one.
Well, and then right there, you're getting at the heart of the problem. Right there is what is the definition of the metaverse?
Yeah, it depends on who writes the definition and what knowledge they have as to whether or not, because, for example, again, it's not about the metaverse, but in the UK, there was a village that had a lockdown, and it was like during the plague. It was a long, long time ago. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this was the first ever lockdown. But actually, Craig said, actually, it wasn't. The Romans did lockdowns, so they would have been the first ones. It's like, yeah, you're right, because it just depends on the knowledge that you own inside your own brain mind as to whether or not that is the correct information. It's the correct information for that person, but maybe there is something older to define it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good that word too. It's everything's about information, and I think that this book is all about information too. And ultimately, the protagonist in the book, his name is Hero Protagonist, and he's a hacker. He's a programmer. He helped design and build the metaverse. Yeah, it's interesting how he envisioned the world from when written in '92. The real world's kind of in disarray, maybe. the government's all broken down. The world is a bunch of smaller factions, governing bodies and neighborhoods, burb He uses all kinds of interesting words throughout it too, but it goes into history, and even the protagonist or the antagonist, I mean, the villain in it is really just trying to control all information in the metaverse and in the real world, and in these repositories of where information is stored and the mediums between them.
And this is why it's good that they're going to hand out to the public to define words as well, which is exactly what Jack's doing in Slictionary. Because, like you say, then you can look at all of the definitions that come in. They will all define the same word, but in a slightly different way and a slightly different understanding of how that definition has come about. Yeah.
Right. And then everyone else who goes and looks them up will get to vote. I guess it's not really defining, then the question is that by convention, or is it defining the word by, is it democratic if you're voting? I don't think really necessarily think any of those, but just that's an interesting to think about.
It's
Interesting
a
as well.
fairer system of definition.
And then that's also part of information too, and the meaning of words. And even in the book, it's really interesting. So in one of my essays I wrote about Bitcoin's intrinsic value as an information system. He kind of goes to the same. In the essay, I argue that language itself is an information system of words, codes, because they're symbols, they're sounds that represent, persons, places, things, actions, and then we put them together in using protocols or sets of grammatical rules that that have meaning, so that we can convey information back and forth to each other. And then, like, verbally is the medium. And then the next thing is, well, there's limitations to verbal communications in our memories. So then we came up with new codes and scripts to write information down on paper, or in clay tablets, or however, all the way through using electricity is our modern information systems is just new codes for us to superimpose information onto silicon chips and transmit it around the world at the speed of light using electricity. And then even in this book, he kind of argues the same thing, that language is just code. And I haven't finished the book too. I still need to get to the end to see exactly what's going on. But
It's interesting you say about light, because I know Sir Toshi, he says that, like, literally Bitcoin is light. It is light. The way that it actually is light, and that's how he defines it as well. So it's interesting you say about
it is. And then in the book, because and then he defines virus too, and like, what's a virus, what's a computer virus, what's something that information that goes viral. The villain uses language as a code and creates a virus, that using language as a code to hack people. And
that's neuro-linguistic programming. That's advanced psychological tactics, which I read about in a CIA document, to be fair.
And he ties it all the way back to, and everyone in the philosophy class would love it too, because he ties it all the way back to ancient Sumeria and it happened there. And when you say neuro-linguistic programming in the book, I don't know the first time it's used too, but he calls it a neuro-linguistic virus. Kind of already have my list of words too to put up there, but like neuro-linguistic virus, well, is something like one I'm thinking about to go with the essay.
Sorry, with Slictionary and being an intern at Slictionary, then are you kind of like, you've set yourself like a target every day of how many words to do and how many like bounties to set? How are you getting people on board? I mean, obviously this hopefully might help to get people on board, but I think this actually goes to, I want to show this video. Can I show this video of you with your crew?
Yes.
We've got your website up here. Okay, so here is a video of Archie doing a 90-second persuasive video presentation to his, you call them squaddies? What do you call them?
I just call them to Marines.
Your Marines. Okay, so to Archie's Marines. So this is quite cool. I like the subject matter.
Good morning, Marines. Right. Good morning, Gunnery Sergeant. Gunnery Sergeant Archbold. In the next 90 seconds, I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and then I'm going to try to persuade you to look into one of today's most innovative technologies. The first question is, if internet platforms such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter don't charge their users for the services they provide, how do they generate billions of dollars in revenue every year? Advertisements. Second question, rhetorical. Second question, why does Bitcoin SV have value? One answer to the first question is that the companies who own those platforms sell our data. One answer to the second question is that the Bitcoin SV blockchain is capable of changing the server client architecture of today's internet in a way that will enable us to maintain ownership of our data and make internet platforms of the future compete to provide us those same services while facilitating for us to sell our data. They won't do it for free, but they'll do it for micro payments that will be less than what we can sell our data for. But the real reason you should research this technology is because Bitcoin SV's ability to disrupt one of the most profitable industries today of aggregating and selling data, well, that's only the beginning of what BSV can do.
Very good. That was a beautiful explanation. I'm interested to know what your guys said. What did your Marines say after that?
Not too much. A couple of them came up to me after, kind of interested, and had a couple questions. But I mean, you know how it is. Like, you have to really study it to understand it. But I think there's a couple of things about it, besides several mistakes I made in there. But even just, why were we doing it? You know, trying to do a persuasive speech, and then I don't know. It kind of goes with the word bounty we just set to cogent. I don't know if it was very cogent or not. Also, if I'm even pronouncing the word properly. It goes back to the original question you asked when we pulled it up too, of what I'll be doing for Slictionary, you know, and hopefully helping with the marketing and bringing attention to the platform and showing people what it is and getting people interested.
So are you going to set homework for your Marines then to do word definitions?
No, I'm not going to assign them that. I have a couple interested. There are a couple Marines that, because they know better than to get me started on talking about Bitcoin, because once I start, like, I won't stop.
Well, this is a really good time actually to just share your website, because you were saying about writing essays and stuff. They are really good. But firstly, let's go to this picture, because this picture, I found who it was. It's Sao Mary B, who's on Twitter, and she's a phenomenal artist, and she's done quite a lot. Can we see it?
I can see it.
Yeah, she did a really nice one of Craig as well, but she's a phenomenal artist. And you told me that you kind of just hit her up. Was it on Twitch or was it on Twitter, and just asked her if she'd do a portrait of you?
No, it was on Twitch, because so that's from an actual photo I took on deployment, a Bitcoin class, and it was a class, but they wanted me to authenticate. It was pretty much KYC to sign up for the class. They wanted a photo, and I was in my tent after a long day, so I took a photo. And then just being on Twitch and seeing all the artists, I wanted to do something, and then as a proof of concept to hire someone out or have someone do work. You know, I think she lives somewhere in South America, you know, so just send her a photo. Hey, can you do a drawing sketch? Because she's posting her sketches, and then I can pay her through Twitch, you know, with just, hey, write /pay and done. So it's kind of like the whole proof of concept for Bitcoin, and, you know, cross border. There's no fees. There's no anything. It's just instant, and it works. And then you could get an artist to do something just like that easy. And it's not even the platform is designed for people to interact, but, you know, that's the power of Bitcoin to do that. You can't really do that on Twitter. You can communicate and you can request it, but you can't just settle a transaction.
There was a bit of a natural disaster where she lived, and she lost like a lot of property, and I think her house was destroyed and everything. So if people are watching, go to her Twitter and go over to her Twitch and give her some help, because she lost a lot within that flood, but she's a phenomenal artist. And as you say, it's such a great way of being able to help people.
And then it's just for the whole world too. You know, we've seen Dr. Wright talk in Africa, and we know what it can do for, you know, third world countries, the unbanked, and all of those benefits too.
Yeah.
So she does this drawing, and I sent her a Bitcoin. Like, that's not much for me as an American, but that's like, I don't know. She posted something happy, like, this is as much money as I make, you know, in a month.
Yeah, and so anything like that, it really, really, really helps people. So you've also got this little dragon up here, which is your very nice. Is that your logo? You're using it for your logo.
That was made by the women of BSV. If you guys go to their site, they do. Obviously, they're also artists. Diddy's an artist.
Thank you for that plug.
Yeah, I was kind of specific in what I wanted, and asked them to do a design for me, and they did it. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Let's talk about this one again. So, was Bitcoin divinely inspired? And I might just have to reshare this because I love this article. This article here, was Bitcoin divinely inspired? And you were inspired to write this article because of the Coingeek Conference in New York in 2021.
I think the Coingeek conferences are awesome. I guess they call them, I don't even know, global blockchain ones now. Jimmy does an awesome job, and this was, I think, Dr. Wright. I think Jimmy was interviewing. Dr. Wright was there. Yeah, Jimmy Nguyen. I think George Gilder was on the panel, the professor from Cornell, and Rafael LaVerde was virtually was on there too. And, you know, he was talking. I'm kind of like him. I get all excited when I think about, you know, how revolutionary the technology is, and how amazing it is that the way it was designed. And then he said that he thought it was divinely inspired. And then the rest of the panel, they kind of joked about it and moved on. So, but I decided to write a whole essay on it. And then I guess the basis is, you know, you can see the photo of Spinoza there. He's I think 17th century philosopher, and he's on Dr. Wright's list of readings for the philosophy class, even though I don't think we'll get there for a couple of years probably. But, you know, I kind of agree with him in one of his statements, saying that, you know, I can't quote him exactly, but it's in the essay that, hey, saying the laws of nature is just another way of saying the eternal decrees of God. And then if divine is having to do with God, and so if I define it that way, and to me the laws of nature and the decrees of God are the same, then if something is inspired by nature, then it's also divinely inspired. I go through not too many, but even a quote from Dr. Wright in his interview with, he did that whole series with Ryan X. Charles, where they went through one of them. He's saying, you know, hey, I didn't come up with this. I see this nature over here, and I see this over here, and I take it and I apply it here. To me, that is him, based on my definitions of the words, that's him saying I'm arguing that he's even himself saying it was divinely inspired. But then, you know, the more I think about it too, like, where does inspiration come from? What is inspiration? That'd be another one that we need to define the word. And if it comes down to it, really, is there any inspiration that's not really divinely inspired?
It's a good point. So yeah, so here we've got the theory of Bitcoin, which is on YouTube. It's a YouTube channel where Craig and Ryan X. Charles explain the theory and the history and everything behind why Bitcoin came about. And also there's about 50 hours of that. And then after that is a series of Ryan asking Craig about every single line of the white paper, which Craig then goes through and explains every single line of the white paper. And that's each individual video is every single line of the white paper. So that's also if you're really into Bitcoin, then that is a really good series to watch to explain all of what Archie's talking about at the moment from the mouth of the inventor, who is Dr. Craig S. Wright.
And then like some of those pictures you can see on the screen too is just examples. Like one of them, he says, the Bitcoin network will form a small world network, kind of like a Mandela network. It occurs in nature, and it's like a neural network. Dr. Wright says too, they're formed the same way. And then like, hey, why does a pufferfish draw, a Mandela shape at the bottom of the ocean? What is it doing? And then even the thumbnail to click on it is just scientists pouring sand on a metal plate, and then like a violin bow, and the vibrations just cause the sand to form a Mandela network. And that's the same topology of what Bitcoin architecture will be. And then also that that peacock there is that the handicap protocol in the incentive system in Bitcoin is the same thing that occurs naturally in nature, that you can see all throughout nature. So I'm going back to George Gilder's Life After Google again, and kind of looking at that and the different computer laws that are Moore's law and Bell's law and all these laws he talks about there. And then after our last conversation too, it seemed like that the handicap protocol or the Red Queen's game, all these natural laws that govern nature are what's employed in Bitcoin. So I think down the road, I'm going to do just an essay somehow on the laws that govern Bitcoin, because there's several clear ones that occur in nature, and then all these computer laws that just are the same things that Bitcoin needs to scale, and the way it's going to scale, and the way it's going to work.
These are called semantics. So the sand on the vibration plate, and the vibration plate is Chandni, CHLANDI, Chandni plate, and that vibrates, and you put the sand on, and this is called semantics. And basically what it does is it gives you the geometric form of sound. So this is literally sound frozen in time. And I think these things are fascinating. I love them. I think they're brilliant, because when you look at these forms, because this is something you can do in the pyramids itself, in the King's Chamber, they did an experiment with this, and the form that was shaped was two eyes, which I thought was fascinating, because it was just from the natural vibration within the King's Chamber. And they put a plate, and they put sand on the plate, and it formed two eyes. But this is like sound frozen in time. But what you will find is in Gothic period architecture, especially in churches, that a lot of these frozen geometric shapes, which is sound frozen in time, they are represented within the architecture. So stained glass windows and things like that. Back in the Gothic period, in the Middle Ages, it was something that they were really obsessed with. And this is sort of another, and that goes back to even further back, like you said, with Sumerians, your Egyptians and your Sumerians. Sound and these geometric forms was something that they really took notice of and used in everyday life. It's interesting that you have a semantics plate on there, and this, again, you say it goes to the divinely inspired, because all things are, as you say, inspired by the nature around us. That's how I would see the world as well. Everything. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good.
I think you need to write a definition on Slictionary.
I know. I have got Slictionary up now. I've got it up. It's in front of me. I've signed in. I am rearing and ready to go. I know that I said I would do it last time, but I just got so busy. But let's go over to the art ones.
Slictionary 2 is hopefully soon you'll be able to put like GIFs like that in the pictures as well.
How do you mean a GIF? Like a little video?
I don't know if I pronounced that right either, but
do you think there will be a time when you can actually do video as well then?
Video.
Yeah, but to a certain length.
That all depends on the scaling of Bitcoin. and the token protocols, and are you going to be able to put, you know, that much data on a token and the miners are going to accept it. So
if we, what was it, 171,000, what was it, how many words was it? It was 171,146 words, and then say each word has, like, I don't know, 10, 12 definitions, and then there's photo, you know, images with each definition, and there's audio file with each definition, and then there's video file. That's a huge amount of data.
Right. Yeah, and then what of the actual data in there? What's just like a hash of the data that's on chain that proves ownership and transactions and everything too. So
Well, so let's talk about your art history, money, and Bitcoin, because this is a great article as well, and there's a lot going on in the images.
This one I started telling a story of when I was 2004. Then in 2004, I was studying abroad in Mexico, and then, you know, we got the opportunity to go to the Palacio Nacional where the president works, and that where there's a mural of one of Diego Rivera's murals. I actually got to see a couple of them when I was there, and everyone, you know, in the story I say, hey, everyone always said how awesome his art was and everything. And I didn't really have an appreciation for it at first. Didn't see the details, like, oh, that kind of cartoonish or whatever. But when I went there, I had one of the teachers with me who was able to explain everything that was going on. And then once I had him in there to explain the mural to me, then, like, I really got appreciation for all the detail and everything that was happening. Because at the time when he was doing his murals, 1920s probably.
History of Mexico murals, 1929 to 1930.
So a lot of the population was illiterate, and this is a way through the art that he told history, which is fascinating too. In a way, it's just information again. It's all about information, is through storytelling and through writing down, and then through art. And then there's so much detail in there, and every single detail was done with intention and purpose, and has every little piece of the mural has a story that goes with it to be able to teach history. And then that's when I realized, oh, how much of, how much, then I could see the work that went into it. So it's almost the proof of work is in it there. And then I could see the value of it because there's so much information in the work that he put into it. But one of the things that always stuck out to me since then was the scene. There's a marketplace scene. I believe it's an Aztec marketplace, and they're exchanging goods and stuff, and everyone has baskets and they have cocoa beans, and they're using the cocoa beans to do exchange. So the teacher told me that was their money. The Aztecs used cocoa beans as money, and I thought that was, like, I was just so curious, like, why did they choose that? I kind of wondered it still no definitive answer. But then in the essay, I moved from, hey, there's the art, there's history, and then to tie in the money and Bitcoin is moved to, well, people throughout the world have used different things for money.
Different mediums of exchange.
About I think the Sumerians or Mesopotamian cultures over there used barley. Salary comes from salt and gold and silver and different fiats and different paper monies, and what are the properties of money, and then talk about those sorts of things, and what properties make good money, and why societies chose them because of those properties. And then eventually, like, well, if you actually see how Bitcoin functions and works as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, it actually, we can all see that it does all of these properties of, facilitate exchange, medium exchange, store value. And we're still a long way from a unit of measure, I argue, in there. But once it scales and once it's adopted, it's going to function way better as a unit of measure than anything else. To me, there's no question. It has to grow, has to scale, has to be adopted, but its ability to function, provide all these functions of money is better than anything we've had in the past.
This is the numpties. Personally, I haven't watched the numpties as the numpties. I've seen individually Isaac Morehouse and Daniel
Krawitz. Yeah. He was their guest on that one, and then they just I don't know how long it looks like it's 2 hours, and they just talk about pretty much the whole. That's what they talk about for the 2 hours, and then so I reference some of the things they say in there, and I kind of make fun of them. I call them numpties.
Well, that's what they call themselves, isn't it? But I do know that Daniel is known as the Emperor of Bitcoin, and he's got a show with Craig Mason, who I absolutely adore. I love Craig Mason. It's worth watching those two together as well, because like Craig is phenomenal and Daniel is phenomenal. Their minds together is a really, really interesting show. So you might actually enjoy that one as well. But it's interesting because you've got paper money as well on this side, and that you say literally, why does a piece of paper with an image on it, why is there value in that piece of paper with an image on it, you know?
Well, and then that one right there should be that's backed by gold. And then I reference George Gilder again, always referencing him. He argued, paraphrasing, that, and I don't remember the exact title. I think it's on there. I can't read it, but I think it was maybe Master of the Mint is what Isaac Newton's role was. And then people talk about Isaac Newton being an alchemist and trying to spending a decade of his life trying to make gold and through chemistry and everything, and he couldn't do it. So he couldn't counterfeit gold. so he decided that was stable. That's when he pegged, I guess, the British pound to gold, created the gold standard, was created a stable economy. And George Gilder would argue that might be Isaac Newton's greatest contribution of creating the gold standard that enabled, the British Empire to, territory that the sun never set on. It was all because of the gold standard.
Cool. So this goes to the next article is I'm going to bring up is the Bastion of Freedom. And this here, you talk about the founders of the United States. Can we see this? Founders of the United States ordained and established the US Constitution in order to form a more perfect union. And you do talk about the Ring of Gyges. And this, again, is like, I really like your writing. I love the way that you write. So you are quite philosophical in just yourself anyway. What did you study at school? I mean, what did you study and what made you want to go into the Marines?
I studied business administration when I was in college. I don't know. I think joining the Marine Corps, I think we all have a sense of wanting to serve or something. And then this, searching for purpose and meaning, probably.
And explain what you do in the Marines, because it's a cool title for a job.
Well, I do signals intelligence. So, just thinking about that in my job and information and, what is a signal? What is intelligence as it refers to information too? So a lot of things I learned there make me curious. And it's the same things I'm curious about in Bitcoin.
Like how it all kind of fuses together, basically.
And I need to rewrite the sentence in the essay I'm trying to do right now, but being like, hey, I don't know if you've seen the pyramid, but, really data has value because, getting to the next essay too, is you can analyze data to abstract information from it. And then from information, you can get knowledge. And then at the top of the pyramid from knowledge, you can have wisdom too. But really philosophically, knowledge is power. So data, information, knowledge is power. When Dr. Wright always refers to, Plato and the Ring of Gyges, the point of the story is that power corrupts. In order to mitigate that, hey, the Republic, how do we govern? Because governance is giving people power. And, in the Declaration of Independence, most Americans know, it sets the premise too that, hey, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. They kind of stop there, but then it gives the purpose of government and that in order to protect these rights, governments are sometimes instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of those governed. And then that's where the founders' heads were at. And when they're thinking about power and they read the Republic, they understood that power corrupts. They understood that, pure democracies don't work because demagogues can influence the masses, which Dr. Wright talks about in this philosophy class. And it shows that he understood that, and he understood why, the founders made a constitutional government in a way that distributes power. And the most unique thing about, Bitcoin, and getting the definitions too, is the way it distributes control over the network. And I think in definitions too, look, like, hey, what's a blockchain? People use them interchangeably. I think for anyone who wants to understand what a blockchain is go to the CoinGeek interview with, Scott Stornetta and Stuart Haber. A blockchain, and they explain the problem they're trying to solve and how they came up with a blockchain that has also been here. That word was coined decades ago as well, and only now becoming popular because of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is more than just a blockchain, because a blockchain is the double spend problem. It solves the blockchain solves the double spend problem in that, it doesn't. It solves the copying of data problems and putting it through a hash, because we know hashes are one-way functions. Mm-hmm. So if it's hashed, it can't be, it can't be changed, or you're going to know it. If one or zero is changed, the hash is going to change, and you're going to know it. That's fine, but you can still change one thing and redo the entire chain if you wanted. But what Stuart Haber and Scott Stornetta did is publish the hash in the New York Times, and that way it was widely distributed and everyone could see it. Every library in the United States has a catalog of the New York Times with that hash, and then it can't be changed. But that's fine. And then that's where they coined the term blockchain that is referenced in the Bitcoin white paper. But Bitcoin takes it a step further, because that not anybody could put information onto that blockchain. It was still centrally controlled by whoever owns it and puts it in there. They could still prove they didn't change anything because they publish it. But in order to distribute control using the proof of work, embedding the proof of work incentive system into the what Scott Stornetta in that one calls the differential equation. And he says that's the true genius of Bitcoin. And that's how Bitcoin is more than just a blockchain, because it distributes control and gives the world a system to use. But how do you distribute control and distribute power over it, and through the proof of work? And that's the genius. And another reason, so people think game theory is just economics, but it's really social. It's bigger than economics. And understanding game theory and why, another reason, another proof of work that Dr. Wright is Satoshi and wrote the white paper, is just how much he talks about the ring of Gyges and how much he understands that. And you really have to think about those things in order to design the system, to understand the problem, frame the problem, and come up with a solution to it. More than just economic, it's the social interaction.
Explain the ring of Gyges.
Well, I don't know, you might be better than me too. I should probably look it up, or I'll tell anyone to go do their research on their own for anything anybody says too. But a hypothetical scenario, like if you had a ring that could make you invisible, would you still act morally and ethically? And it's the whole thing. How do people act when they know that someone's watching, or when they know they're going to do something? How do you do a business interaction if you're never going to see that person again? But if you're in a community where you're going to where you want to transact and you want to have long-term business, you're going to act differently. So what incentivizes people to act ethically and morally And if they could get away, if they were invisible and they could get away with it and no one would ever know, would they do it?
Which brings you to Bitcoin, doesn't it? Because with anonymity, like the ring was given to a shepherd, and the shepherd was called Gyges, and he becomes invisible and anonymous. And because he becomes invisible, he seduces a queen, and he kills the king and takes over the kingdom. And then this is what you've just been explaining. The argument is basically like that the ring of Gyges, it makes you invisible and anonymous, but it's just a barrier between a just and an unjust person.
And I think it's interesting that it's always, a ring is always throughout various cultures, why is it a ring that represents these things as well? But I think with this article too, it's kind of the same thing too. And what I'm going to write on the same essay right now with Snow Crash is like, the hero's journey or stories are the same, and they reflect life. This is allegorical, but it's representative of truth in the world, and that power does corrupt. And then again, information is knowledge, knowledge is power, and then that power will corrupt and try to control. And then, that's what is in the story, and that's what's interesting about it. And, and then how do we solve that problem? And then eventually in the essay too, it's going to be kind of the same thing, get to, we solve it by building George Gilder's cryptocosm is probably where I'm going to get to. And that after more research I've done after our last conversation too, of like, how these systems of the world work.
The hero's journey as well was popularized by a guy called Joseph Campbell, and he was influenced by Carl Jung, who was the psychologist. And Carl Jung is in the acting world because he talked about archetypes and the male and female. And he's somebody that in the acting world, because you can be like, as a female loving Shakespeare, there's not many female parts in Shakespeare, but I could play a male part, so it's how to look at those archetypes and look at masculine and feminine, and how to study a character. And if you are female or you're male and you want to play the opposite kind of gender of a character, and that goes on to a completely different, kettle of fish and different conversation. But he was a really interesting character, and I think he was a scholar, and he liked James Joyce's work. The hero's journey, the world of Joseph Campbell, is worth reading as well. It's immense read.
I need to read the book. It's one I've needed to read for a long time, but it's true, and it's it's an abstract of our lives, and that's why the storytelling has to be done in that way, because that's the way the cycle of our lives really goes. And then in the storytelling, there's still the abstracts, but it's still information passing any story. And like the Ring of Gyges is still is again, the story gives you that concept, which is information and knowledge to help you make. If you see the concept and you understand it, the abstract concept is simply the information is power corrupts. Well, then how do you prevent it? And then, from knowledge is wisdom. Then the wise person can overlay that on their own lives.
So that goes into your next article as well, which is the Bitcoin's intrinsic value as an information system.
I think I kind of already started talking about this one earlier. And just that all information systems, kind of have the same, when you look at them, they have the same, characteristics, that they use code. What humans do is, collect, store, and transmit data and information. That's just kind of, what we've always done.
Yeah.
And there's even like, any person, how do we build buildings and roads and airplanes and telephones and communication networks? No one person learned that in a lifetime and built it. It's just because we acquire this knowledge and we pass it down from generation to generation. So information is, collected and stored and propagated to each other, not only now, but through generations. And I think that's kind of unique to humans. And then we're always building systems that enable us to do those things better. All of these systems have used codes and protocols, and they use other things like publication, and I go through kind of my argument, starting with like cuneiform.
Which is good.
Well, I start with language itself, because a word being a representation, like why is this a pencil? It's interesting in this book, the snow crash. Several times it says to name something is to create it. But to define it or give it meaning, like that's when we can actually talk about the same thing. And then, like I said, hey, our memories only last so long, and we tell stories and pass them down, but then we start writing, and then all written language is more codes, more rules, more protocols, and it uses different mediums that improve upon. So I talk about these information systems often start the same way Bitcoin is starting too, is ledgers of account, like in the same properties too, like in cuneiform started using like tokens that were representations of physical goods or commodities, and they're even like stamped with people's seals, essentially signatures proving ownership. And when you look at other information systems and things that evolved to languages and written languages, they're all the same. I put the stele of Hammurabi, which is another fascinating thing, because he references it, the same thing in this book, and he uses that same, I don't know if you can see it, but he has that exact same one in here. He's got in the metaverse, he has, they call them, what do they call them? I don't know. It's pretty much in the metaverse, you're actually in there virtually. It's 2D, so you're immersed, and it's pretty much a chat GPT that he calls a librarian that he can interface with, and it has a human face and everything, and just goes and gets him all the information that he seeks from the store of information. And they're talking about all these same concepts that I talk about in here. And then this is, and I'll put it up there, say, code is not law, but Hammurabi uses cuneiform, which is just code, to codify his laws. And then the same thing Bitcoin does, by using, is one of the first uses of publication. He puts it in a statue, he puts it in stone, he puts his laws literally in stone, and then puts it out in the public for everyone to see.
Is that how the Epic of Gilgamesh was written? And if it was the Epic of Gilgamesh written on stone tablets, I think that the Epic of Gilgamesh was probably the first hero's journey story, if people have ever read it, because Gilgamesh, like, he defied death, and I do feel that that's probably one of the first hero's journey stories that was probably ever found by modern day man. I mean, we don't know if there's anything before that at the moment, but that I'm sure it was written on stone tablets. It must have been, because it was Akhenaten text. Yeah, sorry, because I love this stuff. This like stuff to me is amazing. The Lost Book of Enki, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerians, the Akhenaten, and all this stuff is just fascinating. Really is.
You need to read this. It talks about the Enki story a lot.
What is it?
It's like one of the. I mean, the plot is kind of all around it. I don't know. I need to read it, and I need to do more research. That's a good question. I can't answer it. I would like to research it. I already have more questions than I can answer in my lifetime. But
same. And whenever I get more answers, there are more questions every time as well. So I think Gilgamesh, I think, was actually a real historical king of the Sumerian city of Uruk. So that's what makes it even more fascinating for me, because I love true life stories as well. So So yeah, but you're right. The more, this is where ancient history, archaeology, philosophy, metaphysics, it all is so fascinating. The way that you say that Craig has kind of thought about Bitcoin, this perfect kind of system, beautiful like Craig says he's not an artist, but I would argue that he is an artist, because I think computer science and the way that his mind works, it is a pure art form, which, as you say, is divinely inspired and guided by his beliefs and the way that he sees the world. So I would argue that Craig is actually an artist. He's just not an artist in the contemporary way that you would kind of paint an image onto a canvas. It's just a different kind of art form. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I would agree too. And it's actually, use the word art and know what it is, but again, like, go into the nuances of the definition and go into the history, the etymology, and the word. What is an artist? And I would agree by that. I would agree that,
like, metaverse, what is metaverse really? Like, we as humans, our brains, we dream, we have the dream world, which is metaphysical, okay, because it's not something that's tangible you can touch. But actually, isn't that really what the metaverse is based around? Is like being inside of a computer, or being inside of your own mind, and being able to actually physically be in something that you can't, which is beyond material object.
I have another theory too that I'm sure people have thought about and written about, probably lots of people forever. But it's another thing, the same thing of what we do. So we create these information systems, but why do we want information? Why do we collect information? And why is that something humans do? Why is this knowledge power? We collect information because it helps us make decisions. Do I do this or do I do that? How's it going to work out? And another thing we do, as we make models, we understand time. We think, 4-dimensionally or more. I don't know. Our brains work in time, and the consequences of our actions goes back to the last philosophy class, and understanding, eating from the tree of knowledge is also the knowledge of time and future, and our actions have consequences, and we try to gather as much information to make rational, reasoned decisions, even though our rational is bounded. But then we create models, and not only do we make better systems for collecting, storing, and transmitting information, we try to make better ways of modeling the world. And I think that's also to help us make better decisions. And we have imaginations. And I think the metaverse is really going to be computer modeling, and more sophisticated computer modeling that we're going to do. It's just the next step of what humans do, and helping us, put information together in ways that model the world in order to help us make decisions in the real world.
I always do bring this up, but 37% of the world's population, which is about 3+ billion people, don't have internet connection. For example, why would a tribe that's never been contacted by man in the Amazon, and there are a couple, why would they need any of this? They don't. It's only kind of the Western mindset that looks at a modern world with a computer mind, because in the Amazon they need to know how to survive, and that's literally the best way to go and forage for food, or kill for food, and skin and survive, and build shelter and fire, and be able to be alert. So it's interesting that you say like modeling, because that only works for people in the Western world that want to live in a computerized age. Does that make sense? Am I coming from because not everybody does.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about the governing with consent. Well, you've only got the consent of those people that want to be governed, and there are plenty of people that do not want to consent. So again, I find it such an interesting concept, because actually you're not representing everyone. You're representing what you think people want, and not everybody does want to, consent to being governed,
Well,
and they don't, it's a completely different world. For example, this tribe in the Amazon, if they see a drone flying over the top, of their heads, is that not alien to them? Is that not a UFO, an unidentified flying object? This is where I then think about. I had this conversation with Michael Hudson, not kind of probably on so much depth, but if that's the case, and then they can visualize what they've seen and they carve that into stone, and then 1,000 years later, we, as 1,000 years in the future, as modern man at that time, come back and see this stone that was carved 1,000 years ago. But we are living in this modern age in the Western world, but this Amazonian tribe are still living the way that they have lived for millennia. And then we come and see 1,000-year-old stone carving. How this makes me then wonder about all the stone carvings from before. How do we know? You've got Atlantis, the Atlanteans, who were an advanced civilization, who apparently may be real or may not be real, but just say they were real, right? The Atlanteans were real, and they had this advanced civilization, technology, and then there was a cataclysmic event. But you've got people on the other side of the world in Australia, Aboriginals, who are living in caves, and they're drawing cave paintings, while you've got the Atlanteans who have got flying machines and goodness knows what.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I haven't done a lot of research too, but just listening to like Randall Carlson and who I don't know there's a few other guys, the evidence they present and their logical and rational explanations, they seem to make a lot more sense to me. There probably were advanced civilizations before some cataclysmic event, and then
the cataclysmic event, the Younger Dryas, which I know you know about, 11,600, 11,800 years ago, that's been proven to be real. That was a comet that fell onto Earth, and it caused a massive tsunami all over the place and caused mass destruction and devastation. That's a given. That happened. The Atlantis thing is a little bit different, because there is the school of thought where Randall Carlson thinks that it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and it's been sunken because there's some land mass there that he feels could be. Then you've got Jimmy Corsetti, who thinks it's the Eye of the Sahara, which is the Ricotta structure, because it's in the concentric circle shape. But then there's also a place in Spain that is underwater, which is also concentric circles, which has got evidence of having a civilization live there. But then there's also Thoth and the Emerald Tablets, where a lot of people think that Antarctica is Atlantis, because Antarctica, 2 miles down through the ice core, there is evidence of lush green vegetation, and there are supposedly pyramids on Antarctica. It is an interesting theory. Nobody can prove it. It's like the oceans. We just do not know enough about our own planet to be able to say for sure what actually happened.
Yeah.
And this information used to be carved into stone. That is still there. We can see that. Then it was written onto clay tablets. We've got tens of thousands of them through the Sumerians. Then it was written on papyrus. Now some papyruses have been saved, but they deteriorate. Then it went to paper. It was hemp first, which is solid. Then there was paper, and that all deteriorates. But then there's book burning. So all knowledge, so much knowledge has been lost throughout the ages. And then there's censorship, where, for example, recently they've got Roald Dahl books, i.e. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where these sensitivity readers are coming in and going, oh, well, you can't put that, you can't say that, you can't say that Augustus, you can't say that. People will get really offended. It's too sensitive to say that he was fat. But you have video games where you have 12-year-olds or 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds who are playing video games, and they are going around shooting people. But that's not sensitivity. That's not, so this censorship thing, I think, is part of hiding knowledge and information from people. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree. And then I'm gonna go there, and then that's what the villain in the book is doing, and that's the same consistent throughout history. It's knowledge is the power and control, and why does that corrupt? And then it's the same thing with the founders understood it in the U.S. like the First Amendment. Americans like hold freedom of speech sacred, but it's more than freedom of speech. The First Amendment is freedom of religion, and it's really freedom of to be able to think and about and believe and think. And even in this, the abstract concept is he's trying to control information and trying to control the way people think,
which is 1984 and Brave New World, isn't it, with the thought police and everything as well. So, and interesting enough, actually, you mentioned freedom of speech, but you are a Marine and you're into intelligence and signals, so you must understand freedom of speech and Official Secrets Act, they clash, because if you've signed official secrets, then you've done that for your country and it's an official secret. I
was actually, and this is where you're going to get into, you can't live in a society and really be free. And then philosophers have talked about this forever too. The basic problem and why we have to have governance, and why, anarchy and how you define that word, the connotation with anarchy is bad because it leads to chaos. And if we have the premise of, hey, there's good and evil and people are sinful, but what if I have the right to do whatever I want? At what point does that infringe on another person's right? And that's why governments are instituted, to protect one's rights, because somebody else can infringe on another person's right to whatever, say just the most basic right to life. Well, why don't I, if I'm a free person, I can do whatever, why can't I take another person's life, as an extreme example? But as a society, we agree, like, no, we should have laws against that. And then governments are to protect rights. And then even when they have states and state governments, how do you protect the rights of the citizens from other states who might have malintent towards them or invaders? And then again, in order to do that, to protect you physically, you need information. And then how you collect and store all that information. And then there's techniques. And the argument is, hey, you're not going to be able to have the ability, if you don't protect these secrets, then you're not going to be able to protect the rights of the citizens. And then how do you govern that? And how do you ensure that's doing properly? And
exactly.
Then it gets all into law. And it's the same thing with when Dr. Wright talks about the same thing. Do you want anonymity? Because look at Snowden or WikiLeaks, and again, the Silk Road. Look what was happening with the Silk Road. Do we want human trafficking? And do we want these things as a society? But if we don't, then we need to create laws, and we need to enable law enforcement to be able to find these people. There's the problem, and there is no perfect solution, and it's constant back and forth. Because another one that Rafael LaVerde said in that same one, a word that I hadn't heard before, is democide. And it's why the U.S. has the Second Amendment, is to protect, the biggest threat may not be, from the outside. We institute governments to protect our individual rights. But what happens when we give these governments this power derived from our consent, and that power corrupts them, and they become authoritarian? Then how do we protect ourselves from this government? And even the founders who designed the system in a way to distribute power knew that, hey, this is as far as we can tell, this is a good system based on, all the information we have that has been written by the Greeks and Romans and, Magna Carta and all the Brits and you guys did. We're going to develop this system, but we know it's not going to last, and the people are going to have to maintain it, or else people with power will be corrupted and they will eventually do it. And then, the Freedom of Information Act in the U.S. has like, I think 8 categories or something. I need to research it myself too, but like, why things can be classified in what ways as well. And then another thing for people, like when you look at Bitcoin, I always want to make the argument too, like, people want, a tool. Bitcoin is just a tool. And at the end of the day, I think it's amazing. Design is artistic, and it's, to me, the best thing to bring sovereignty back to the individual since the writing of the U.S. Constitution, in my opinion. Its potential to do that. I mean, it hasn't done it yet, but it's still just a tool, and it can be used, and Dr. Wright always says, hey, it's political. It's outside of this system. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin is a system of the world, but politics is outside of it. Governments can use these systems, same as any other tool, to protect the citizens, to control the citizens, and the citizens can use it the same way to have oversight on their governments in the same way. Bitcoin should be looked at, in my opinion, the same way, like as the Second Amendment. People might not like guns or whatever reason, but then they've been invented. The tool exists, and governments, you can give only the government the ability to own them and have total control over it, and give all the power to the government, or you can give people control over it. And it's the same thing with the internet itself. Information is power. You can have a government control the internet, or you can have a distributed system that the people can control, or is controlled by the laws of nature, which is what Bitcoin is. People talk about central bank digital currencies. You can have a centrally controlled, blockchain run by the government, and they can even publish the hashes, but that doesn't mean that they can't change the protocol, or if you give them the power to control the system, to do whatever. So you could have a blockchain centrally controlled, and it can be more efficient. You won't have to put the time and energy into the proof of work. But like my next one, the next essay, I kind of argued wrong that that proof of work is the cost of trust, because that's what proves you can trust the miners, because they put in all that time and energy. But really, proof of work in Bitcoin is the cost we pay to distribute control over the system in a trustworthy manner.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah, I know, like I said, I talk about Bitcoin forever. There's a million things I was going to talk about, and even in Slictionary alone, but hey, go be wordsmiths and try out Slictionary. And hey, tying back to the metaverse, what is it? And then the definition gets into like Web3 and NFTs. Is it more than a virtual world? I guess just, I want to say things, but I guess I'll put my next essay out there hopefully soon, and maybe I'll get feedback. But yeah, go check out Slictionary.
And what was your Twitch handle again?
It's just Archie. Let me see, the number is 14564.
14564 on Twitch. Okay.
Yeah, Slictionary's got Jack and John DeFelice. I'm pronounce his other co-founder. They have a long-term vision, and when you look at the things they're doing for a dictionary and how a dictionary is built, it's like, when I look at that, it's the same way as looking at Bitcoin as an information system. Like, it meets all of these things that information systems do to get better. When I look at monetary systems, Bitcoin does all these things that all monies have done in the past that worked, and it's going to work in a better way. And then same with Slictionary. If you look at how dictionaries were built, how they're maintained, how they're structured, how language changes and how we record it, and how it's been done through the past of storing information and meaning of language. It looks to me like Slictionary is starting to build the next generation of that, and it's going to be, it's going to be the dictionary for Web3 or the metaverse. Or in my next argument, my next essay, I want to try to influence language too, and maybe try to get people start using George Gilder's The Cryptocosm, because it's the ethos in George Gilder's Cryptocosm that's going to solve all these problems, and it's the architecture of the network is what's also going to help bring individual rights and the sovereignty over your information and data and ownership of digital assets back to the individual.
And have you got a plan of action of how to market?
Not really. I think that's going to be one of the things that I look at. Probably have to get on some of these sites, and then the things they've already done, like the word bounties, is a great idea. Trying to gamify it. Jack uses the term like tap good veins. Like, so I mentioned like a couple of the Marines will have written definitions, but it's because they're people who are interested in words and language and fascinated by it. So I'll put that out there too. Anybody, like, they already, even before I talk to them about Slictionary, these are people who already do word of the day meanings. They make up words of their own and try to see if the root of the word, if their buddies can figure out what it is. They're word nerds.
I've got a question for you, Van. What's your favorite word?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can pick one on the spot.
I'll tell you mine. It's anti-disestablishmentarianism. I think that's a phenomenal word. And then supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I mean, that's another great word as well. But
what does that one mean?
What, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious?
The first one again. So I've never heard that word, to my recollection. Maybe I've heard it. Well,
okay,
I know supercalifragilistic.
It's a song in Mary Poppins.
Right.
Okay.
I know where that comes from. And then again, like, hey, there's the word. You know where it was coined. You know the story. You know the history. I still don't really know the meaning. I might have to go watch the story again. But watching the story is where you get the meaning of the word from. But what was the first word?
Okay, well, it's anti-disestablishmentarianism, and it's the longest word in the English language, and it's made up of 28 letters and 12 syllables. The definition of anti-disestablishmentarianism is basically, it's the opposition to the establishment of the Church of England, and that's what it is. So it's quite a simple.
Yeah, you could infer, I guess, the meaning from a lot of the parts of the word just by hearing the anti-disestablishment.
Well, it's because in Catholic Church you couldn't get divorced, so King Henry VIII wanted to get divorced. He came away from the Catholic Church and established the Church of England, and that's what it is. I mean, it's a great word. I love it.
I mean, just look at the analysis of that story and information and power and rules and protocols, and and it's another thing humans do. We collect, store, and propagate information. We model things, and even the systems have rules. All systems are rules that enable us to cooperate and coordinate and compete and work together as a society. Laws and rules, and that's just another thing that humans do. But like, maybe he didn't like that rule, so he just changed them. Like, is that good or bad?
To be fair, I mean, it was a good thing for Henry VIII had 6 wives. Whichever one it was, she got divorced, and he didn't kill her and chop off her head. So she was a very, very lucky lady in that respect. So yeah. Yep. So Archie, thank you so much for coming back firstly, and this conversation, the first conversation was fascinating, but this conversation is even more fascinating as well. So thank you so much for your time and showing us Slictionary again, and then talking through your essays. And if anybody does want to hook up with Archie, he's on Twitch at 14564. You are also a member of the MetaNet ICU. So if anybody wants to join the MetaNet ICU, go to the metanet.icu and follow all the instructions and come and join in the conversations. Otherwise, you can be found at bsvarchie.com, and that's where all your essays are. And I highly recommend that you read them because they're fascinating. And thank you for being such a wonderful and fascinating guest as well, Archie.
Thank you for your podcast. I see you've been busy, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.